Yeats warns his readers that life is one constant endeavor to come to a double contemplation, that of the chosen image and that of the fated image. Now, a great example of what he means by this and how to think of the first interpretation of Leda, as we've just discussed it, and the second one, which we are about to discuss. A great way to imagine these two in conjunction comes from a picture common in Gestalt theory. Now, some people look at this picture and they'll see a vase. Other people will look at this picture and they'll see two people in an argument staring face to face at one another. Why people see what they see in general, it's hard to say. But you can imagine that if I gave you a paragraph to read before looking at this picture, and the paragraph was on this exquisite white vase, one that was just renowned all around the world, and then shown you this picture, the likelihood that you would see the vase instead of the two faces is very high, and vice versa. If I were to hand you a paragraph and sort of precondition your mind before I showed you the picture, and the paragraph would be a story about two men who were violently arguing with one another, when I showed you the picture, the likelihood that you would see the men's faces, and only the men's faces, increases significantly. Now, I say that to say this. Your preconditioned idea, or the idea you form beforehand, or the attitude that you bring to the interpretation beforehand, the knowledge you bring beforehand, all can limit you just as much as it can liberate you. And so you must be very careful of what preconditions and what prejudices you bring into this interpretation. Because what you'll find is that sometimes you have to fight with your own erroneous stances and opinions and principles. And so when we read the poem the first time, and we get all the way down where we see Agamemnon's name, we suddenly realize, or hopefully we should, that we have made an error. That the interpretation that we got was not the one intended, at least not completely. And I'll tell you why. Last line reframing. Readers will almost certainly overlook the Trojan War within Leda before getting to Agamemnon's name. It is almost an intuitive fault that many of us, if not all of us, find ourselves within when we begin the poem. We are pulled into the carnality, physical, sexual, violent depiction, description, suggestion of what is going on here. It's very compelling, it's very gripping, and it's very hard to escape. At the very least, our progress is checked by Agamemnon's name. And his name allows for us to rethink at least the immediate line previous: the broken wall, the burning roof and tower. You see, before stumbling on Agamemnon's name, There was no scene of the Trojan War within this poem. It did not exist. But when suddenly finding the general there and reframing the previous line, the broken wall of Troy stands out here in the midst of this poem just as clearly as it would have on the Ionian plain 3,000 years ago. These two worlds, the one of Leda and the swan, and the bushes next to a stream, and the other of Agamemnon and the Trojan War coming to its end, are what cognitive poetics call text worlds, meaning that these are the two worlds that you have created in your mind while reading the poem. Yeats's use of this reframing tactic in Leda is a great example of what he wishes to achieve by using pronouns and articles the way that he does. See, when he says the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, it has a very specific meaning. And in fact, if he were to say her broken wall, her burning roof and tower, it would have an even more specific meaning, one that Yeats does not wish to give his reader. So he uses the word the, and he describes it as the broken wall, the burning roof and tower. For this is the specificity that he wishes to provide, no more, no less. And what he achieves in this is seen when the line completes itself by saying, "And Agamemnon dead." Now this is a very peculiar part of the poem. This is perhaps one of the reasons why this poem is so well known and famous today, is for this specific tactic. And so what happens here in the poem is that when Agamemnon's name comes up, the reader realizes that a mistake has been made. The previous lines, the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, were thought to display or depict the assault of Leda. And it turns out that this was a misinterpretation. However, the reader does not know until he or she gets to Agamemnon's name. And Agamemnon, for those of you who don't know, was a famous war general at the Battle of Troy. The myth of Agamemnon, in short, reveals that he sacrificed his only daughter to get approval to go to war, and that after the Trojan War was over and Agamemnon returned home, his wife had waited for his return all those years, 10 years long, and killed him for what he had done to their daughter. And so you see, in the myth of Agamemnon and the Trojan War, it is the ending of the war that sends Agamemnon back home to his long-awaited fate. And you'll remember that the Trojan War was ended when the Trojan horse was pulled inside, and in the night, a body of soldiers crept out to attack the encampment from the inside. What's a pronoun and article, some may ask? A pronoun is just a class of words. An article is just a class of words. What I mean by that is, like, a pronoun is he, she, him, her. It refers to a person of a particular sex, him, her, she, he. An article is a word like the, or a, or an, a, the. 3 articles. Now these are very small words in the English language, but they're also very important words. The first thing to recognize about Yeats's use of pronouns is that the banner, the first 4 lines of the poem, has 6 pronouns in it, and the body of the poem only contains 1 pronoun, despite it being 6.5 lines long. There is a clear distinction in these 2 pieces of writing, the banner and the body. It's a clear distinction on how pronouns have been used. And so I ask myself, why? What could this mean? If we take a look at the poem, it's a little easier to see this distinction in visual. So what you'll notice is that in the banner, the agent and the action, the person doing the thing and the thing that's done, that connection is very clear. The great wings still beating above the staggering girl. Well, now we know the wings belong to the thing, separation. We know they don't belong to the girl. Now we know that the thing is above the girl, separation. We know that there is a girl. We know that the thighs are her thighs. We know that it is her nape. We know that is his bill. We know that he holds her helpless, and that it is his breast against which she is held. You see, the action is very closely connected to the agent or the actor. So it is clear, maybe, what's going on in this scene. The same cannot be said for the following lines in the body, where there is only 1 pronoun. And that the body asks, how can those terrified vague fingers push? Not her, not his, those. Which is a very objective way of describing these fingers. Not only does it obscure who they belong to, it also obscures the sex of the person who possesses those fingers, and it also obscures the number, so that it could be one person's fingers or the fingers of several people. And I hope you notice here how it makes a great difference when you use, a pronoun that's appropriate to your meaning, and when you choose not to, and you use a word like those, that strips away some of the detail that the pronoun would have provided and leaves the reader with an image that is a little fuzzier. It leaves the reader trying to fight to figure out exactly how to imagine what's going on here. And then even furthermore, it goes on to say the feathered glory when assumedly speaking about the swan. So Yeats could have just as easily said his feathered glory, but he doesn't. He says the. So again, he strips the pronoun that should be there, his, and he replaces it with an article, the, which is objective. It doesn't tell us anything about the person, whether it's male or female, so on and so forth. It's just the. And you'll see more of this as you go through these lines. For instance, it says, how can body? It's not her body or his body, but again, how can body? Not even a the this time. And how can body laid in that white rush? It doesn't ask, how can that body laid in his white rush or her white rush, but just rather that white rush. And again, but feel the strange heart beating. Is it his heartbeat? Is it her heartbeat? We don't know. And it's because of the way that Yeats specifically decided to use pronouns and articles to remain a bit aloof, to give the reader this sort of creative space where they can wrangle with the text and imagine it several different ways until finally, the duplicity has been weeded out and the image holds itself together in one cohesive, logical function. Unless the reader think that, maybe this isn't the case. Maybe that's not what's going on here. I would just point to another poem of his written in 1931, nearly 8 years after Leda, called Cool Park and Ballylee. And scholars have had an interpretation of Cool Park and Ballylee that adds a bit of credence to what we're discovering and discussing here about Leda. Namely that the poem Cool Park and Ballylee has a double meaning. And the second meaning is achieved, again, by a manipulation of pronouns and articles, so that two different interpretations can exist together in the same text. And just as discussed here with the hermeneutic circle, so too there must a person have specific knowledge to be able to see the shift and catch the second interpretation hidden within and underneath the surface layer of Cool Park and Ballylee. You have to be somewhat of an insider to be able to see the cue that turns you around in the poem and asks you or compels you to reinterpret it when this new word, for instance, Agamemnon and Leda, so when this new word suddenly wakes you up and makes you realize that things are not as they seem. And so this practice of Yeats can be found in other works as well as Leda, which I think lends a great credence to it, to being a tactic of his. And I think with the material that we are here to review, Leda and Cool Park and Ballylee, and potentially for Yeats scholars, much of his other work, I think that this is a tactic that is very easily established as a tool of his within his repertoire. And so if Yeats provides a greater meaning here with how he decides to go about his pronoun and article use, then I find it profitable to analyze the rest of the poem based off the same principle, in hopes of potentially finding even more. Because one great complaint that I always had was that when scholars reframe the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, because of Agamemnon's name, that they don't go far enough. Why only reframe the one line immediately before it? Not even the whole sentence, not even the whole thought. Why only reframe the one line? So I have to ask myself, can the other lines be reframed as well? And if so, how do I go about it?